My wife cheated on me with her boss, stole $250, $0 from our joint account to buy a house with him, and now we're embroiled in a bitter legal battle over the property I thought was ours. I'm devastated and don't know who to trust anymore. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife, Lisa, turned out to be nothing but a lying, cheating bitch. Honestly, I thought we had the perfect life, married for 7 years, good jobs, a nice house, 2 kids, and what seemed like a solid partnership. But that illusion shattered in a matter of days. The craziest part, it all started with a gut feeling I ignored for months. It began with small things. Lisa's phone always in her purse, hiding her texts. She'd get defensive when I asked about her day, brushing me off like I was just paranoid. She started working late more often, claiming it was just stress, but I could tell something was off. She'd come home late, smelling different, sometimes with a strange perfume I'd never seen her wear before, and her stories about her boss, Mark, kept changing. At first, I thought maybe she just had a crush or something harmless, but deep down I knew it was more. Then one night I decided to check her phone. I didn't plan to go through it, just a quick peek out of curiosity. That's when I saw the messages. They weren't just professional emails, they were flirty, intimate, and downright disgusting. She was telling Mark she needed more and that she was thinking of leaving me, which made my stomach turn. I saw photos, just snippets at first of her in bed with him, her body pressed against his, her hand on his chest. I could tell from the messages that they'd been sleeping together for months. What hit me even harder was the bank statement I found the next day. I was reviewing our finances, just trying to get a grip on things, and I noticed a huge withdrawal, 250, zero, gone from our joint account. That's $250,000. I couldn't believe it. I immediately called the bank, but the money was gone already. I started digging deeper, and that's when I found out she'd used the funds to buy a house with Mark. Not just any house, an expensive, sprawling estate out in the suburbs, the kind of place I'd never even dreamed of buying. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I mean, I knew she'd been acting weird, but I never thought she'd do something so cold, so calculated. She was always bitchy, always making excuses, lying through her teeth about everything. She'd tell me she was working late, she needed space, or that Mark was just a she didn't mean anything to. Yeah, right. I saw through her bullshit now. The betrayal was one thing, but the money, that was the real kick in the teeth. It was our savings, our future, all gone to fund her affair. How could she be so selfish, so manipulative? For days I just sat there, stunned, trying to process what I'd found. I kept asking myself, how did I miss all these signs? How did I not see her slipping away? It's like I was blind and she was just lying to my face every step of the way. And then the anger started to bubble up. Not just anger at her, but at myself for trusting her so blindly. I kept thinking about the nights she'd be out working. The little lies, the way she'd look at Mark like he was some kind of prize. I was furious that she'd stolen from us, from our kids, just to chase some stupid fantasy with her boss. But what hurt the most was knowing she'd been lying, sneaking around behind my back, and that she'd planned this whole thing for months. The betrayal cut so deep I didn't even recognize myself anymore. I knew I had to confront her. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The truth had to come out. But I also knew that once I did, there was no going back. The trust was shattered, and I was left standing there, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. That's the part I'm still trying to understand. How someone I loved so much could turn into this monster overnight. Or maybe she was always this way, and I just refused to see it. The next step was obvious, but it wasn't going to be easy. I had to face her, hear her explanations, and decide what I was going to do about the mess she'd made. I just never imagined it would come to this. My wife cheating, stealing, lying, and then trying to cover it all up. It's a nightmare I can't wake up from, and I'm still trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces. When I finally confronted Lisa, I thought I was prepared. I'd been gathering evidence, making mental notes of every lie, every suspicious detail, and I was ready to hear her spin her story. But nothing prepared me for her reaction. She was so bitchy, so dismissive, like I was just an obstacle in her new life. She looked at me with that condescending smirk and said, "You don't understand, Jack. You're just jealous. Mark's the real man I want, and if I want a new house and a better life, I'll take it. You're just too insecure to see I deserve more." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I was furious, but I also felt a deep sting of betrayal. I asked her how she could do this, how she could steal from us, from our kids, and she just shrugged like it was nothing. "It's just money, Jack. Money comes and goes. Mark made me feel alive again. You were so dull, so boring. I needed excitement, and he gave it to me." I couldn't believe the audacity. She was lying so blatantly, trying to justify her betrayal. She kept insisting she didn't love me anymore, that she only stayed for the kids, but I knew better. I knew she'd been planning this for months, probably even before I found her messages. Her entire attitude was bitchy, dismissive, like I was an annoyance she'd rather get rid of. The woman I married was gone, replaced by someone cold, manipulative, and completely self-absorbed. I remember feeling this surge of rage mixed with heartbreak. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how much she'd hurt me, but I kept my cool. Instead, I told her I knew about the money, about the house, about everything. Her face didn't flinch. She just looked at me like I was a fool for believing I still had any control. "You're too late, Jack," she sneered. "The house is ours now. Mark and I are building a future. You're just going to have to accept that." That's when I realized this wasn't just a fling. It was a full-blown betrayal, a carefully calculated plan to leave me with nothing. I felt my stomach turn as I pictured her and Mark in that house, living the life they'd bought with our savings. The $250, $0 wasn't just money, it was our security, our future. And now she was telling me it was all over, that I was nothing but an obstacle to her happiness. I left the house that day feeling numb. The betrayal was so raw, so fresh, I couldn't even cry. Instead, I just kept replaying everything in my head: her lies, her bitchy attitude, her coldness. I realized I didn't recognize the woman I married. She'd become someone else entirely, someone I didn't know or trust anymore. I felt so stupid for not seeing it sooner, for ignoring all the signs. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the future, about the legal battle ahead. I knew I had to fight for what was ours, for the money she stole, for the house she took from us. But I also knew that trusting her again was impossible. The woman I loved was gone, replaced by someone who only cared about herself. I felt a mixture of heartbreak, anger, and determination. Whatever it took, I was going to get justice. I owed that much to myself and to my kids. The next morning, I started making calls: lawyers, accountants, anyone who could help me figure out how to get that money back and stop her from doing whatever she wanted with what was supposed to be our life. Sitting there, staring at the empty space where our savings used to be, I realized I'd been played for a fool. And now, I was left with nothing but a broken heart and a bitter resolve to fight back. After I got over the initial shock of her cold, bitchy attitude and her outright lies, I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't let her just walk away with everything: our money, our house, and my dignity. I spent the next few days deep into research, talking to lawyers, and trying to piece together what I could do legally to stop her from emptying our accounts further or transferring ownership of the house. I also started digging into her financial records more thoroughly, trying to find any other signs she might have missed or hidden. One thing that stood out was how she kept insisting she deserved this. "You're just insecure, Jack," she told me during one of our heated arguments. "Mark makes me feel alive. You were so dull, so predictable. I needed someone who could give me excitement, and you just couldn't do that anymore." Her words were venomous and her attitude was bitchy, like she was angry at me for not understanding her need to cheat, steal, and run off with her boss. I remember feeling this strange mixture of sadness and rage. It was like I was watching a nightmare unfold and I couldn't wake up. I started to question everything. Did I ever really know her? Was she always this manipulative? Or was I just blind to her true nature? The more I thought about it, the more I realized she had been planning this for a long time. Every little lie, every excuse she gave about working late was all part of her scheme. The legal side was complicated. I found out that she'd transferred the money into a separate account, one she set up under a different name. She was so bitchy about hiding her tracks, but I was determined to find a way to get that money back. I hired a lawyer who specialized in financial crimes and divorce cases, and we started building a case to freeze her assets and investigate her financial activities. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I needed professionals who knew how to handle a betrayal like this. Meanwhile, Lisa kept acting like she was the victim. She'd call me insecure, accuse me of not trusting her, and say I was just jealous of her happiness with Mark. She'd call me paranoid when I questioned her about the house, the money, or her whereabouts. Her tone was bitchy, dismissive, like I was an annoyance she'd rather get rid of. Honestly, I'd never seen her like that before. The woman I married was gone, replaced by this manipulative, selfish person who only cared about her own pleasure. What really cut deep was how she threw in my face that she was leaving me and taking everything: our house, our savings, the kids' future. She told me flat out, "Mark and I are building a new life, Jack. You're just too insecure to see that. The house is ours now. You're not going to stop us." Her words echoed in my mind, and I felt a cold fury rising. How dare she? How dare she steal from us, lie to my face, and then act like I was the problem? I started to think about what I was going to do next. I couldn't let her get away with this. I had to fight for my rights, for what was rightfully ours. I reached out to some friends who knew about property law and finances, trying to get advice on how to challenge her ownership of the house. I also started gathering evidence, screenshots of her messages, copies of bank statements, anything that could prove her deceit and the extent of her betrayal. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry all at once. I kept asking myself how she could be so bitchy, so manipulative, so cold. I thought about the woman I married, the woman I loved, and how she had turned into someone I barely recognized. It was like she had become a stranger, someone who only cared about her own pleasure and wealth. I felt stupid for trusting her, for thinking she was the love of my life. Now, I was just trying to hold on to whatever I could, my dignity, my sanity, and the little hope I had left. Every day since the confrontation, I've been fighting this uphill battle. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I do know one thing: I'm not going down without a fight. I'll do whatever it takes to get back what she stole, to protect my kids, and to rebuild some sense of normalcy. But honestly, the betrayal has left scars I don't think will ever fully heal. Sometimes I wonder how I missed all the signs, how I let her get away with so much. And I realize now that trust is a fragile thing. Once it's broken, it's almost impossible to fix. The legal process moved faster than I expected, or maybe I was just finally waking up to how deep her deception ran. My lawyer managed to freeze the house and the account she'd set up with Mark. The house, this huge, beautiful place she bought with that stolen money, was now technically under dispute. I couldn't believe she'd gone so far, so cold, to take everything from us, including our future. I felt sick every time I thought about it. Meanwhile, Lisa's attitude only got bitchier. She started throwing around accusations, calling me paranoid, jealous, and controlling. She insisted that I was just insecure because I didn't want her to be happy. She told friends that I was overreacting, that she was just trying to find herself, and that I was holding her back. Her tone was sharp, dismissive, like I was just some obstacle she needed to get rid of. Honestly, I'd never seen her like that before, so bitchy, so manipulative. It was like she was trying to justify her every lie, every theft, every betrayal. She kept insisting that Mark was just a business associate, but I knew better. I found more messages, this time explicit, telling her how much she wanted him, how she needed him. She'd lie, deny, then turn around and accuse me of being paranoid. The audacity. She'd call me insecure again, like that was supposed to make me doubt myself. But I knew the truth now. She'd been screwing him for months, stealing from us all along, and now she was trying to act innocent. I also discovered she'd transferred a large sum of money, another $50, $0, into a secret account she set up in her sister name. She was so bitchy about hiding her tracks, but I was determined to find every last piece of her deception. I hired forensic accountants to track the money, and they found even more hidden assets. It was clear she'd been planning this for a long time, and her attitude was just a mask for her greed and selfishness. The emotional toll was intense. I felt betrayed, angry, and disgusted all at once. I kept asking myself how I missed all these signs, how I was so blind to who she really was. I thought about all the nights she'd be working late, the sneaking around, the lies. It made me question everything, my judgment, my trust, my entire relationship with her. I'd loved her so much, and now I was left with nothing but a bitter taste and a broken heart. The worst part was knowing she'd been manipulating me the whole time, playing the innocent victim when she was the mastermind behind this entire scheme. I started to consider my options. I knew I had to fight her for the house, for the money, for any chance of getting some sense of fairness. I decided to file for divorce, but I also wanted to make sure she couldn't keep the house or the money without a fight. I was prepared to go to court, to push for full financial disclosure, and to demand she pay back every cent she stole. I also contacted private investigators to gather more evidence of her ongoing schemes, just in case she tried to hide more assets or transfer the house to someone else. The anger kept bubbling beneath the surface. Every time I saw her bitchy attitude or heard her dismissive tone, I wanted to scream at her. She'd act like she was the victim, like I was the one ruining everything. But I knew the truth now, and that truth was that she was the one who betrayed everything we built. She stole from our kids' future, from me, from everything we had. I was furious that she could be so selfish, so manipulative, so bitchy, like she was better than everyone else, entitled to everything. I realized I couldn't undo what she'd done, but I could fight to make sure she paid for it. I was tired of feeling helpless, tired of feeling like I was losing everything. I started focusing on my kids, making sure they knew the truth, protecting them from her manipulations, and planning how to rebuild a new life. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew I couldn't let her get away with it. Not without a fight. I'd spend everything I had, do whatever it took to reclaim what was ours and to teach her that betrayal has consequences. That's the thing with people like her. Once they cross the line, there's no going back. And I was done being the victim. It was time to take control. The court hearings were a nightmare. Lisa showed up every day with that bitchy smirk, acting like she was the victim, trying to spin her lies about how she was just finding herself, and how I was trying to control her. But the evidence was clear. The messages, the bank statements, the transfer of assets, all of it painted a picture of calculated deceit. Still, she kept up the act, throwing tantrums and acting entitled, like she was the one wronged. It was infuriating to see her so bitchy, so dismissive, like she was above the law. My lawyer did a good job presenting the case, arguing that the house and the money were stolen assets and that she had no right to claim them. We requested a full financial disclosure, and I was surprised how much she tried to hide. She kept insisting she deserved everything, that she was the one building a future with Mark. But I knew better. She was just a thief and a liar. The more she pushed her narrative, the more I realized how manipulative and selfish she'd become. The judge finally ruled in my favor, freezing the house and the assets she'd transferred to her sister. It was a small victory, but it felt like a huge relief. Still, Lisa's attitude didn't change. She was bitchy and combative, trying to intimidate everyone in the courtroom with her attitude. She told the judge she was entitled to the house because she was the real owner, and that I was just an insecure, controlling husband. Her tone was so condescending, so bitchy, I almost wanted to tell her to shut up. But I kept my composure. I knew this wasn't over yet. We still had to go through the divorce proceedings, and I was determined to get everything back, every penny, every asset, every piece of the life she'd stolen from us. I had hired forensic accountants to track down her hidden assets, and they found more accounts she hadn't disclosed. I also discovered she'd been trying to transfer the house to a shell company, probably planning to hide it forever. I was furious. Her bitchy attitude was just her way of trying to intimidate me, but it wasn't going to work. Throughout this process, I felt a range of emotions: anger, sadness, disgust, but also a strange sense of empowerment. I realized that Lisa's bitchy attitude was just her way of trying to control the narrative, but I wasn't going to let her. I was going to fight her every step of the way. The most important thing now was to protect my kids and make sure she didn't get away with destroying what little family we had left. I also started working on rebuilding myself. I'd been so by her betrayal, I'd forgotten who I was. I took up new hobbies, reconnected with friends I'd neglected, and focused on my health. I knew I had to be strong, not just for myself but for my kids. They deserved stability and I owed it to them to stand tall despite everything. I kept telling myself that this was the end of her manipulations, that justice would be served, and that someday I'd rebuild what she tried to destroy. But deep down, I knew the scars wouldn't heal overnight. The betrayal had cut so deep, I wondered if I'd ever fully trust anyone again. Still, I promised myself I wouldn't let her define my future. I'd take the lessons learned and the pain and turn it into something stronger. Because in the end, I realized that no matter how bitchy she got, how manipulative, how cold, I was the one who still had my integrity. And that was something she could never take away from me. The final court date was a blur of legal jargon, tense faces, and that suffocating feeling of losing control. Lisa sat there, still trying to act like she was the victim, her bitchy smirk never quite leaving her face. She insisted she was entitled to everything, that I was just some insecure husband who couldn't handle her happiness with Mark. But the judge saw through her act. The evidence was overwhelming. The secret accounts, the forged transfer documents, the messages that proved she'd been planning this betrayal for months. When the judge finally made the ruling, it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. The house was awarded back to me, and she was ordered to pay back every penny she stole, plus damages for her deceit. I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. It was a hard-won victory, but I knew the emotional scars would linger. Still, I could breathe again, knowing I'd fought for what was right. Lisa's reaction was typical: bitchy, dismissive, angry. She stormed out of the courtroom, calling me paranoid, controlling, and jealous. She yelled that I'd ruined her life, that she'd never forgive me for taking everything, even though she was the one who stole from us in the first place. Her attitude was so bitchy, so full of contempt, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because deep down, I knew she was just trying to save face, to act like she was the victim, but I saw through her lies now. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding what she tried to destroy. I moved out of the house she stole from us, found a new place for me and the kids, and started therapy to deal with the betrayal. It wasn't easy. Some nights I'd lie awake replaying everything, wondering how I missed all her signs, how I let her manipulate me for so long. But every day I pushed myself to move forward. For the sake of my kids, for my own sanity, I refused to let her win completely. Looking back, I realized this whole ordeal taught me a lot. Trust is fragile, betrayal cuts deep, especially when it comes from someone you loved and thought you knew. Lisa's attitude, so bitchy, so manipulative, was just her way of trying to control the narrative, to protect herself from the consequences. But I learned that no matter how manipulative someone gets, truth and justice will come out in the end. I learned to be more cautious, more aware, and to value myself enough not to accept betrayal or bullshit. Most of all, I learned that revenge isn't about hurting her back, though I won't deny I fantasized about it sometimes. It's about reclaiming your life, standing up for what's right, and moving on despite the pain. I'm still healing, still rebuilding, but I'm stronger now. Lisa might have tried to destroy us, but she underestimated my resilience. I've come out the other side knowing that the real victory is in surviving, in learning, and in never letting someone's bitchy attitude or betrayal define who I am.